Are you overwhelmed by WordPress website nightmares? Has your site broken or you have other unexplainable problems? It's probably because you haven't stayed on top of your maintenance. Welcome back to another Solucru Talks. I'm Jonathan Sellers, CEO of Solucru, and today I'm joined by our senior developer, Richard Wickham.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for having me.
Yeah. So today we're going to dig into a topic that's maybe a little bit more on the boring side for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, when people are not properly maintaining their WordPress websites are the times when the nightmares really come out.
Absolutely. I think it is something that is commonly overlooked because a lot of times people would build their website, they'll get an agency to build it for them, or they will try it themselves and then they just leave it.
Yeah.
They won't work on it again. Firstly, sometimes the sites don't update. And the reason they don't update is because you have to make sure that you actively selected in the tools that you use, maybe your hosting provider, to say, look, I want to automatically allow these updates to happen. And in the other part is, even if you set it to automatically update, if no one is actively monitoring these sites to ensure that all these plugins that you're using together with the theme that you've installed is working together, the reality is if no one is actively monitoring that, you could see some strange things happening on your site and you could be the one that notices it. I think that's the best case scenario. Or unfortunately, it could be your prospective client. So now the person is seeing a warning, nothing's really wrong with your site, but all it needs is one click on the back end that can fix it all. But because no one's monitoring it, because no one's taking the responsibility for that, because you've got an agency to build it for you. So you think, okay, site's done.
So many times people assume that the maintenance is part of the purchase, but you have to realize the maintenance, that's ongoing tasks. It's not a huge task. It's not the same as building a page or building a website, but it's something that somebody has to go do. They have to be monitoring it, checking it. We at Solucru, we offer a maintenance program that goes, it's an ongoing program. And so if you take on that program, then that includes typically hosting for most of our clients, but it also includes the plugin updates, theme updates, the PHP update for WordPress itself, and then depending on your build setup, there could be some other components there that we're also monitoring.
These themes, these plugins that is being used, the theme provider and the plugin provider tries their best to make sure that it's compatible with all variants, but in reality, when an update is released, there's always the possibility that something can break on your website. And even with a new update that comes out, it doesn't mean it's automatically going to fix the original issue. We test these things on a monthly basis. So I say monthly because that's the typical maintenance plan. You know, when everything just goes right, you just update. But sometimes people do release updates, which they will call critical updates. Yeah. That's normally when there's a security issue or they have flagged in their plugins a potential risk, something that could be causing issues with themes that's out there or other plugins. So what should happen is someone needs to go in and make sure that when they update, everything is still working.
So if I'm somebody watching this video right now, and this is a very I would say more technical topic compared to some of the other topics we talk about, is something that may be a little scary to people. So they may be saying, well, hey, if I get a WordPress website and I got to deal with all this stuff all the time, like, why don't I just go to one of the other platforms that maybe doesn't have this type of setup? And I guess I would ask you, Richard, why do we at Solucru, why do we build on WordPress with this type of maintenance requirement?
That is a good question, Jonathan, because I mean, all the things that we just discussed, that can create a lot of headaches for you. So you might initially, not hearing it now, say, but yeah, let me rather go to a platform like Wix or Shopify where you don't have that issues. But the reality is, a lot of times when you start the development process, when you start having that conversation as to what you want your site to look like, you start realizing the limitations of those tools. So a lot of people don't just want the same website. They want their site to be unique. They want some customization. And with that, WordPress is still one of the, I think at the moment, it's one of the biggest websites, still content management systems still in the world. And there's a reason for that. It is because of the customization it provides. So all these plugins that we're referring to, all these themes that's available, yes, it might have this drawback of, yes, you must maintain it, you must update it. But the reality is it far outweighs the advantages that you get with that customization of your site being unique, of all the functionality that you can add. And when you want to move that site to a different platform, it's a lot easier to transition a WordPress website than a website like Wix, which is proprietary sites or software.
Yeah, and that gives me, so it made me think about a site we've recently talked about. I won't mention the site name because they have a lot of problems with the site right now, but they have just tons of third-party tools stacked into their site and just maintenance problems all over the place, not maintaining things. They're getting critical errors and functionality is just gone. It's just not there. And so when I think of what you just said, and you're like, well, you get this added customization, and I think of the person who's kind of in that world of, I know I need all these other pieces into my site. What about people who say, well, I'm just going to build a fully custom site. I want it coded from the ground up. How does that affect things?
If you're going to build everything from scratch, just imagine the amount of hours that someone's going to have to put in to develop all of this functionality for you. And at the end of the day, that's going to cost a lot of money. So as soon as a client starts realizing that, they're going to say, okay, but what is the alternative to that? Because that's going to be it's not just the cost, but also the time it's going to take. Yeah. All of a sudden, a WordPress website can take you from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on how complex the website is that you are going for. And a custom solution from the ground up is going to take a lot more time, a lot more planning, because you literally have nothing to start with. You have to build everything from scratch, a lot of planning. And when you start looking at further down the line, adding customization to it, things that you didn't initially thought about, that is where you are going to incur even more costs, because initially the development team might not have considered every aspect of how this site could mature into something else. And now you're going to pay for that cost because someone has to go back and rethink how are they going to build that. And every little step that you take is going to cost more money.
That also is an added benefit to this question about WordPress, because the framework is there that you just need a plugin, basically, right? And this is the implementation method to make that functionality exist on your site. But back to the maintenance side of it, so if you do implement custom plugins, how does that maintenance process differ from a commercial plugin?
So just like the plugin providers release patches for code, a patch is not always a negative thing in a sense of, oh, we made a mistake, we now need to fix something. A patch could also be just keeping with the times. Every couple of years a PHP update, and WordPress runs on PHP, so you would have to have a PHP server set up. Most hosting providers will have that. But as we're going through that, from let's say 8.3 to 8.4, and eventually they will say, look, the version you're using, the version the site was originally built on, is no longer being supported. Just like your operating system at home, it's no longer supported, you now need to upgrade. And it's the same thing with custom code. So if we build something that works today, in a year's time, it might not work because of whatever reason. So when it comes to maintaining that code, it would also be checking every month, going through, and this is something that the average person might not be technically possible for them to do because they won't have that experience. They don't necessarily know where to go check.
So, but what you said, I think, really resonated with me, because if you work with somebody like Solucru, so we typically build within the same framework. We have a core framework that we typically use. So we're building on WordPress. We typically are using Elementor Pro. We have a few performance plugins that we're using. We are typically using the same form builder and things like that. And many of the other same plugins or same pieces of the puzzle across all the sites we build, because we trust those. We know they work. But at the same time, if you are also having your site built or maintained by us, then when something happens, right? When something happens along that framework, along that any piece of that puzzle, there's now a known issue. Then immediately, because we use that across all of our sites, we now know that that issue is likely present across all of our sites. And then we now know what the fix is, and we can immediately do it. But I do think that having somebody who is very familiar with the setup makes the fixes much quicker, much simpler.
Absolutely. There's, like you mentioned, we do a lot of research as to what plugins work, which ones we feel comfortable using for our clients. And with that, because we continuously use a lot of these plugins, there's the odd exception every now and again, depending on the scenario, depending on the client's needs. But you are right. As soon as a problem is known to us, and that's the other benefit you have from having a team look after it, is that you don't have to keep tabs of all of these things, because the information come to you from various sources. So you need to know when someone is saying to you, hey, we've released a security plugin update, or we've released a fix for something. And then you need to also know, how does that fix apply to your website? How do you actually get it working with all the other plugins that's running? So once we find a solution, we can just roll it out to all of the client's websites. And the benefit is, a lot of times when this happens, and it doesn't happen too often, major downtime, major issues, but when that does happen, most of the time the clients are not even aware, because we fixed it before it became an issue for their clients. So that is a big benefit, is that we are in the back end doing all the hard work, making sure everything is just working, making sure we're keeping up to date with everything. And we can easily address an issue, whether or not it would be, look, we need to replace a plugin with a different plugin because of an issue. Those are all things that form part of our maintenance plan, because you've trusted us to ensure that your site is always performing at the top of the best to its ability.
Well, I would say this is, I think maybe some people might say this is a little less exciting of a topic. So thank you, Richard, for helping walk everybody through this today. But I think it's also one of those topics that's maybe less exciting, but it's super critical, because as I referenced earlier, the site that I'm talking about, they're having major problems, and it's things that could have easily been prevented had they been more proactive, or had someone been more proactive, or also maybe their setup could be adjusted as well. But either way, these things really affect businesses, because if your website is driving revenue, and your website is not available, or it's not functioning properly, then guess what? You're not bringing in that revenue and that business, those new customers that you need. So taking these actions, like having someone like Solucru manage your site with a plan like ours, or you committing that you're going to do it yourself and you're going to learn these things. So thanks, Richard, for sharing with us today all these insights into how proper maintenance can have such a big impact, and what's all involved with that process.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Jonathan. And my suggestion would be to the people out there that when you look at a maintenance plan, go for it. It definitely outweighs the cost of what you could run into if something happens with your site, the downtime you would experience.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Definitely. So if you're still with us right now, please make sure you like and subscribe, so you'll get updates on all of our new videos. And if you're concerned about your WordPress website, then reach out. Let's discuss ways we could help you possibly maintain it and or potentially build a new site that represents your brand the way you want it to. But otherwise, I will see you next time.